I am so thrilled to be here today with Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Senator Tom Tillis, the leaders of the Senate NATO Observer Group, or SNOG, which is always fun to say, especially on Valentine's Day. I wanted to...
We tried for a new acronym and we couldn't get there.
I think it's really apt that we're here with the Senate NATO Observer Group, right? Because one thing that we as reporters, and I feel like everybody is trying to understand, is what moment are we in? And so I guess I just wanted to ask you, we've had a number of speeches today, President Zelensky, but really Marco Rubio. Could you say a little bit, give us a little bit of a vibe check? Like, where is the relationship at the moment? Post-Rubio speech, but also post-Greenland?
Well, I thought Ambassador Ischinger did a nice job of saying Secretary Rubio's speech was a reassurance for Europe, certainly after being in the speech by J.D. Vance last year. It was nice to hear him focus on the importance of the European partnership and the transatlantic alliance. But obviously there's more work to do, and in my discussions with the leaders that we've met with, people have been more or less concerned depending upon their position, depending upon where they're from, and depending upon who they've been meeting with. I think what's important is that we have a very large delegation here from the Senate. It's bipartisan. We have about a quarter of the Senate here. And part of the reason we're here is to provide reassurance that we understand how important our European allies are. And certainly we understand the importance of NATO. And Tom and I clearly understand that, as does this Congress in a bipartisan way. And, the reason we understand how important that is because it's in our own national security interests. I think it's in the national security interests of the 32 countries that are members of NATO. We are there because we know what a strong military alliance this has been and how important it is to our security.
So, Tillis, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to note that we're in a partial shutdown, and the leadership was really discouraging travel because of optics and maybe the need for a vote. So you're looking at a near historic turnout for a congressional delegation with that in place. If that doesn't send a strong message about Congress's, the Article 1 branches, statement about the importance of the transatlantic partnership, I don't know what does. Now, the other thing, I did like Marco's speech. I texted him shortly afterwards and told him I thought he did a great job. Because for a day and a half before he gave that speech, I've been going around telling everybody we're fine, we've got to do a little bit of adjustment. I don't think anybody believed me. But clearly, the president, that speech would not have occurred if it wasn't voicing the position of the administration. And I think that's positive. What I'd been saying for a month or more, it's not business as usual, shouldn't be. It's not the worst case scenario that I'd heard from people. It's a medium case, new case, and I think we can leave Munich with a sense of optimism that we'll settle things down, mend some hurt feelings, and some justifiably so because of the rhetoric, put Greenland to bed, and get back to a partnership that's the most important, most enduring in the NATO alliance in the history of mankind.
Lindsey Graham was here, and he said very bluntly that we should be moving on from Greenland and kind of hug it out. I'm paraphrasing. But I mean, it seems like that's what the administration wants to do, and I think its actions relative to Greenland are pretty unpopular, and we're coming up on midterm elections. I mean, should we move on, or is there more to say?
Well, as Tom and I tried to point out in a number of sessions that we've had together, it wasn't just the Europeans who were outraged about the president's comments on Greenland. It was the Americans. One of the reasons we saw a change in behavior on the part of President Trump was because of what the stock market did and because of what the polls show. Americans don't want to acquire Greenland. They understand that Greenland is in our backyard, that Denmark and the Kingdom of Denmark, including Greenland, have been allies of ours. I like to point out that Denmark was one of the first countries to recognize the new United States of America in 1792. They fought with us in 2 world wars. They lost as many casualties in Afghanistan on a percentage basis as the United States did. And it's important to recognize that. And I think the American people understand that. So I also try and point out to people, Congress, they say, okay, you're not going to do military action. Well, are you going to buy Greenland? I said, Congress is never going to buy what we can get for free. The fact is, both Denmark and Greenland have been very upfront in saying, we've had a treaty since 1951 with Greenland. We're willing to partner with the United States on whatever you need. Security, bases, we used to have 17. America closed all but one of those, not Greenland or Denmark. Critical minerals, whatever it is. And we are going to be stronger if we work together and partner than we are if we try and go it alone.
Who's responsible for the course correct, do you think?
I think the American people. I mean, look, I got angry. That's why I'm wearing my YOLO bolo here. This bolo has 2 meanings. One, back in December, we were able to right a century-old wrong by recognizing the Lumbee Indians, North Carolina tribe that had been a victim of racism and neglect for over a century. And interestingly enough, their population, it'll be the largest tribe east of the Mississippi, and now it is recognized, but it's roughly the same population as the indigenous population of Greenland. So when we were in Copenhagen a while back after this stuff broke, I actually brought one of my bolos to give to the Greenlandic Prime Minister to say, anytime I have to go to the floor and talk about Greenland, know that I'll have this on. And I've heard it said by someone that who gives a shit about who owns Greenland. The 55,000 indigenous people of Greenland give a shit about who owns Greenland. And at the end of the day, we need to show them respect. And we need to understand the fiscal reality that we don't have to pay a dime to project power in the Arctic with our partners like Canada, who will bring the icebreakers to clear the channels to get there, and some of the Scandinavian partners who are the true Arctic experts, along with some of our Alaskan military personnel. So what I think happened, what really angered me is when Stephen Miller said it is the position of the American people that Greenland would become a part of the United States. It's a position maybe of the executive branch, but it's not the position of the branch that I have an election certificate to, which is why I felt strongly that he needs to speak for himself and ideally speak less frequently.
And maybe not at all.
Yeah,
actually.
But at the end of the day, words have consequences. The weight of the administration have even greater consequence. And we need to measure that and not be a bully. And what I saw was a bully. But what I really saw, I love baseball. But if you want to see me break a television set, have my Atlanta Braves commit too many unforced errors in a consequential game. That was an unforced error. And I happen to love my TV a little bit more than Stephen Miller, which is the only reason I didn't throw something at it.
But do you think that Senator Shaheen's right, that it was the stock market or public opinion?
It was public opinion. Look, see, the thing I love about the American people is we don't like bullies, folks. Our nation was founded rejecting bullies. I think it's in our DNA, whether we want to believe it or not. Every once in a while, the rhetoric gets a little bit hot. We get a little bit cowboyish. But at the end of the day, the collective consciousness of the American people do not like bullies. And what they saw in that statement by Stephen Miller, what they saw in that statement about we will take it by force or take it by... The American people don't like that, because the thing about the American people is they also don't like government at the end of the day encroaching on them. And if we can do that to a sovereign nation, what steps, how many steps away are we from impinging or infringing on our own rights?
It's a great segue to President Zelensky, since we're talking about folks standing up to bullies. There's a group of senators who met with President Zelensky to get a status update on the war, status update on the peace effort. What did you learn there?
Well, the president started out with the hardship that the people of Ukraine are experiencing, particularly in this cold winter when Russia has targeted their energy infrastructure. And of course, they've lost so many people, both civilian and military. And he talked about what their needs are and how we can be helpful. I think he was speaking to a crowd of supporters. It was a bipartisan group of senators, and we are all very supportive of Ukraine, and we reinforced how courageous we think Ukraine is, not just on their own behalf, but on behalf of Europe and on behalf of democracies throughout the world, and how important we think it is to support them.
Is there any sense that we're getting closer to any sort of peace deal? Is Russia just playing rope-a-dope?
I think Russia's playing rope-a-dope. Look, anytime you can tell Putin's lying anytime his lips are moving. I just don't believe him. I think he's untrustworthy. He's responsible for countless lives and kidnappings of children. He wants to string this out, but Putin needs to understand that we know what's happening to his economy. We know the meat grinder he's sending his soldiers into. And I hope that for the first time in history, we don't have a president who doesn't want to take the opportunity to defeat a totalitarian running Russia. That's all Putin is. And if he wants to come to a table with something that's verifiable, I said this in Davos and I'll say it here, I will not respect any agreement between those two countries to the extent that the U.S. is involved in providing security guarantees unless it's ratified by Congress. In my opinion, it's not going to be worth the paper it's written on otherwise. Because you can't trust them. There's got to be some recourse.
And President Zelensky talked about how important he thought it was that Congress ratify an agreement. Yeah. And because administrations are going to change. Right. But if Congress ratifies the agreement, then it's going to be much more permanent.
It'll have enduring value and hopefully some more enforcement mechanisms.
To be clear, is this a deal that the U.S. would broker, or that the administration would broker and then turn over to Congress, or would Congress pass security guarantees independently?
Well, I think all of that has to be negotiated.
Yeah.
But the importance of security guarantees is really the critical factor, because what we've seen since I've been in the Senate is we saw Putin go into Georgia in 2008 and take 2 provinces, and we didn't do enough to stop him then, and then he went into Crimea. I remember being here after Putin went into Crimea, meeting with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, John McCain was there, and talking about what we needed to do as Europeans and Americans to stop Putin, and we didn't do enough then. We didn't give Ukraine the lethal weapons that they were asking for in a timely fashion, and so we're back here again. We do not want to be back here again in 5, 10, 15 years with the same problem because Putin hasn't been willing to stop because we were not strong enough in saying we are going to stop you from further encroaching not just on Ukraine, but on our other NATO allies, on the Baltics, on Poland, because everybody I've talked to, and Tom's on the Intelligence Committee, so he's got better intel than I do.
No, I'm not on intelligence.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not intelligent enough.
But it has been that this is not going to stop at Ukraine if Putin is successful in Ukraine. And so we better be prepared now to address that future threat that we're all going to face.
What's the sticking point around security guarantees right now? Where are the two sides of that conversation? My understanding is that they're making real progress. The sticking point is whether Vladimir Putin is really serious about negotiating. It's also about the role of the United States as a backstop, what the coalition of the willing is going to do in terms of troops on the ground, and about the length of any guarantees. One of the things we talked about at the meeting this morning is that we need a long-term security guarantee if we're going to ensure that Russia doesn't take action again in the future. How come the Graham-Blumenthal bill hasn't moved? Is there
It's confounding to me. I mean, what do we got? 86 or 87 co-sponsors?
Sorry, this is the sanctions, the Graham-Blumenthal Russia sanctions bill. 86,
87 co-sponsors. Look, I can understand if the president wants to. I for one, think that we need to send a message to Putin that we're serious about this. I don't understand for the life of me why we can't pass a bill. Do you know how hard it is? I don't know if we could get 86 co-sponsors for recognizing Mother's Day in the current climate of Washington. So we have that many co-sponsors, a veto-proof majority. Why on earth can't we just pass it out of the Senate, have it locked and loaded in the House, and then the president is only one vote away from being able to impose it? And I've been saying this for months. I'm a co-sponsor. I know Gene is too. We need to move it forward, and we need to be serious. Look, I really think that Putin knows he's losing. Hell, Putin even lost his hybrid warfare in Moldova. They had a fair election, and he lost. This guy is on his heels. The economy is on its heels. He's not winning in the battlefield. We all thought when they first went in February several years ago that it was going to be over in weeks. And now he's lost. He's had 1 million battlefield casualties, either dead or unable to return to the battlefield, and the numbers are mounting. He is losing. I see a lot of activity in the discussions. I don't know if we see a lot of productivity, but I do believe we should just pass the bill. If we can't get it out of the House, leave it to the Speaker to sort that out, but get it ready to go to the President's desk.
Not to open can of worms, but is there an issue with that bill because of the size of the tariffs involved, or that it has tariffs involved?
Well, one of the things that Senator Graham announced, I think, yesterday was that he had gotten a commitment from Leader Thune to bring the bill to the floor, but it's a very different bill than the original bill. So I think hopefully it will come to the floor because we need to send a message to Vladimir Putin that we're serious. But we've also passed a number of other bills out of the Foreign Relations Committee that would do the same thing. We've passed legislation to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism because of their kidnapping of Ukrainian children.
And they are.
Yes, that would allow us to use the American seized assets to support Ukraine. That would, let me change track a little bit, because we also have legislation to address the shadow fleet, which is one of the things that we need to do is ensure that Russia's war machine is shut down. So we have a bill that we passed out that would sanction Chinese companies that are supporting Russia's war machine, and that would address the shadow fleet, which is one of the biggest sources of revenue for Russia. So we've got lots of other pieces of legislation. We need to take them up, we need to send a message to Putin, and we need to put pressure on him because, as Tom said, he's not going to come to the table unless we start putting some extraordinary pressure on him. And we need to make him understand that we are serious.
Those pieces of legislation have passed Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which you're the top Democrat. Do you have a message for Majority Leader Thune about those bills?
Yes, he should take them up. They all passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. This is not, I mean, again, this is an issue that has overwhelming support in Congress. You know, despite what the mixed message from the Trump administration pretty regularly, Congress still supports Ukraine and wants to see action. And one of the things that we haven't talked about is that it's not just Vladimir Putin who's watching what we do. It's President Xi in China. It's our other adversaries. And if they think that we're going to walk away from Ukraine, if they think they can divide the transatlantic alliance and undercut NATO, then, you know, nothing's going to stop Xi from going into Taiwan, from his other territorial gains in the Indo-Pacific that he's looking to do. So it's important for us, not just because of Ukraine and what's happening in Europe, it's important globally.
Can I ask, so I need to note that, that both of you are serving out your last terms and not running for re-election in early 2027. So the next time there's a Munich Security Conference, who's going to be leading the Senate NATO Observer Group?
Someone other than me. How about you, Gene?
Yes, but you know, what's exciting is that we've got a number,
We got a lot of people interested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who have been working on this, who are interested, who are going to take
And
over.
Joe, I think I think Gene and I agree that we'd like to have an answer to that probably in Ankara.
By the
for
time of the
summit,
NATO
yeah.
NATO
Yeah,
summit.
yeah.
And I mean, can I just ask that there are different wings of the Republican Party at this point. Is it tough to find somebody to be the Republican? No.
See, that's the thing. I mean, my gosh, look, at least 20 members here. I think maybe 5 more, could have been 5 more, had logistics worked out. I bet every single one of us knows at least 1 or 2 other members who are not here who have the same position that we do. And last time I checked, that's a supermajority. Enough said.
And, we've talked about this before, but Tom and I were in Brussels in 2018 for the NATO summit. We got off the plane, and there were questions because President Trump was there.
He
and,
may have said it was no longer relevant,
That's
something like
right.
that, while we were on the flight. Yeah.
And so we got off, and people were saying, President Trump is going to pull America out of NATO. What do you say to that? I'll tell you what we said. We went back to Congress, and we passed a law that said nobody can pull the United States out of NATO without approval from the Senate.
Yeah.
So there is support there, and
Joe,
this is-
I tell you, I think I even said it on this stage last year, maybe not in these terms. A $2 trillion shortfall in the first 20 years of this century by countries not paying their 2% threshold is why we're here. A $2 trillion shortfall collectively over 20 years. Again, think about the demand signals, think about the industrial base that we could have in Europe, think about the interoperability, the power projection, maybe the deterrent that could have caused Ukraine to never happen. So the president is right in being frustrated by that. And quite honestly, if he hadn't used the sort of rhetoric that he did, we'd probably still be worried about how we're going to get to 2%. Now we're talking 5%. I don't necessarily use the same language as the president, but I do believe that message needed to be said, and I think the transatlantic partnership is going to be stronger because of it. Now, there are people that may or may not support President Trump. I support the majority of his policies. I support the majority of his whats. My differences have to do with the hows and some of his advisors like Stephen Miller. But make no mistake about it, this president is responsible for getting everyone on notice that you have to be concerned with your national defense, and all other things flow after you've secured your borders and secured your homeland.
All right, I'm going to let that be the last word. I know you both have another appointment after this. Can I get a round of applause for Senator Tillis and Senator Shaheen, please?
thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good, thanks.